The Miami sun blazed overhead, casting its merciless rays on the sweltering streets below. Damien crossed the boulevard, adjusted his dark glasses, combed out his long black hair from his face, and continued walking towards the Princess Hotel. Clad in black despite the heat and the humidity, he looked cool and sharp, a shadow against the city's vibrant colors. As he approached the entrance, he noticed two homeless men sprawled on the sidewalk, seeking refuge from the midday sun under the hotel's canopy. He walked by them without breaking his stride, his boots clicking softly against the pavement. One of the homeless men called out to him, "Hey man," his hand stretched out begging, "Can you spare $1?" Damien stopped, turned around, and he looked at the man. Unable to withstand Damien's penetrating eyes, the man lowered his gaze. "Enough of this path you've chosen. Your pleas for spare change won't save you." Damien's voice boomed inside the men's minds. Freaked out, the two men looked at each other and then at Damien, who had revealed his true form. Their eyes widened as they beheld Damien's radiant and otherworldly presence. The glow of divine light surrounded him, and ethereal wings unfolded majestically from his back, extending a sense of authority and divine power. "Hear me well. Your current choices lead to a darker fate. Change your ways, for the road you're on leads to a place far worse than the streets you now call home." Overwhelmed out of their mind, the two men jumped on their feet and, leaving their few belongings behind, fled the scene in sheer panic, never looking back. Damien smiled, satisfied. That ought to do it. Back into his human form, he continued towards the hotel, and, as if sensing his arrival, the door swung open without a touch. Damien entered the lobby and glanced around the dimly lit lobby. Its fading fluorescent lights cast a pale and uneven greenish glow that created shadows that seemed to linger in the corners. The faint smell of stale cigarette smoke hung in the air, clinging to the peeling wallpaper that once might have been vibrant but now presented a muted color palette. Damien looked to his right and saw the flickering neon sign that intermittently spelled out Prince's Hotel, the letters struggling to maintain their luminosity. Below it, behind the front desk, a young man looked up from his glossy nudie magazine, sizing up Damien with a bored expression. Deciding that the newcomer wasn't worth his time, the young man returned to his magazine. In the corner, a weathered Cuban flag hung as if tired of witnessing the comings and goings of individuals with questionable motives. The sounds of a distant television playing a Latin American soap opera caught Damien's attention on the strategically placed sofa in front of that old television set that hung from the wall. Nothing like Latin soaps, Damien thought, and with purposeful strides, he crossed the lobby. Across from the television, a Cuban man sat on the sofa. Damien sensed the man's irritation and anger radiating from him like heat waves. "Oye, no me jodas más, brother," Damien heard the man yell into the phone as he sat down next to the screaming man. "Pero coño, qué manera de hablar es esa, mi amigo," Damien said in a friendly tone. But the man responded with an obscene gesture and continued shouting. Not for long, though, as Damien put his hand on the loudmouth's forehead, and he fell unconscious like a puppet whose strings were cut. Damien took the cell phone, and after a "te llama de vuelta," he hung up and threw it onto the belly of the sleeping yeller. Determined to enjoy the soap opera, Damien settled on the sofa and watched the television with a mix of fascination and bemusement. He loved them so much, he could never have enough. It played out before him, full of passionate embraces, dramatic close-ups, and over-the-top declarations of love and betrayal. The front door creaked open, pulling Damien's attention away from the television screen as a man entered the lobby. Charlie was hard to miss. He dressed in a white guayabera, dark glasses, and a hat that shaded his face from the harsh Miami sun. A thick Cuban cigar smoldered between his lips, filling the air around him with a rich, heavy scent. He watched intently as Charlie made his way across the lobby towards the staircase, pausing briefly to glance at the unconscious Cuban man on the sofa. Damien followed Charlie's journey up the stairs until it disappeared from view and promptly went back to watching the television. Sunlight flooded room 213, casting a warm glow over the well-worn furniture. Angel, a young man with haunted eyes, hunched over a cluttered table by the window. The map before him was covered in diagrams and routes, each one painstakingly traced out in red. Beside it lay a Glock 17, its black surface gleaming dangerously. A series of photographs fanned out around the gun, showing a man in various locations: a park, a cafe, an alleyway. He tried to concentrate on the plan to follow, but something was nagging inside him. He was no killer. Sure, he stole, cheated, and even bit up dudes a couple of times, but he was no murderer. In his characteristic manner of disregarding consequences, Angel impulsively accepted this dubious job offer that presented itself. As the father of the child Victoria carried within her womb, Angel found himself on a perilous trajectory. His love for Victoria was profound, motivating him to go to extremes. But once again, he neglected the straightforward path of finding honest employment and confronting life's challenges head-on. Instead, he followed his pattern of seeking the easiest, albeit the most detrimental, solution. The door to the room swung open without a sound, and without Angel noticing it, Charlie stepped in. He took a long drag on his cigar, the air filled with the rich, fragrant smoke. Angel's head snapped up as the scent reached his nostrils. Alarm flared within him as he grabbed the Glock, spun around, and aimed it at the intruder. But Charlie raised his hand, and the gun flew from Angel's grasp with supernatural force, landing softly on the bed. Charlie walked to the table and sat down. "Sit down, Angel. We need to talk." For several days, Charlie had persistently attempted to steer Angel away from his self-destructive path. But time was running out, and this was the last opportunity to help him, and in so doing, help himself. Angel emerged from room 213 empty-handed, tears streaking down his cheeks. Charlie had shown him a never-ending cycle of violence that would inexorably lead to more bloodshed and danger. He had felt the pain of a life devoid of genuine connections, cut off from friends, family, and especially Victoria's love. All that was enough to change his mind, but Charlie had also shown him the reward of walking away and taking a righteous path. Angel's life together, with Victoria and the baby, the joy of fatherhood, and the pride of providing for his family, resonated as a powerful force for transformation inside Angel's soul. He walked down the stairs, each step heavy with emotion. Upon reaching the lobby, Angel spotted the public phone at the front desk. Damien, engrossed in watching television, glanced over at him briefly before returning his attention to the screen. With a deep breath, Angel dialed a number. The muted conversation was tense, and even without hearing the words, the weight of it hung heavily in the air. Angel looked at the man behind the counter. "Thanks," he muttered, scanning the room one last time before walking out of the hotel. Damien watched the door close behind Angel, looked up to the ceiling, and grinned. Meanwhile, back in room 213, Charlie stood by the window, puffing on his cigar as he gazed out at the city. Damien appeared beside him, leaning against the wall with a thoughtful expression. "Nice work, Charlie," Damien said, breaking the silence. "I can see you are in a hurry to go." "Go?" Charlie questioned hesitantly, fear seeping into his voice. "You mean this is it? But what about, everything?" "You are done, Charlie. You did it, you redeemed yourself. I know it doesn't feel like much, but that's what being a good person is like. Doing good for its own sake. And now, you must go." Charlie took a deep drag from his cigar. "I'm not sure I want to go." "Don't say that. After all you've done, you deserve it. You've paid a great debt. I'm gonna miss all this." He touched the glass with his hand, as if he wanted to touch the city outside. "I'll tell you a secret, Charlie. You won't miss anything. In fact, you won't remember anything you did in this world." Charlie chewed on this revelation. The thought of leaving his grotesque existence behind both frightened and comforted him. He looked at Damien. "Are you ready?" Damien asked. "No, Damien. I'm scared. For the first time in my life, I'm afraid," Charlie confessed. "You've nothing to fear, Charlie. Just close your eyes and relax." He took a final drag of his cigar, the smoke curling around his fingers like tendrils of lost memories. "All right," he agreed finally, the word heavy with finality. Damien raised his arms, his dark eyes glinting in the room's light as he closed them. The air in the room seemed to thicken with anticipation, and then, without warning, a brilliant ball of white light began to grow around Charlie. His face, previously etched with fear, now reflected a profound sense of peace, as if he had finally found a sanctuary within the storm of his memories. As the light intensified, it engulfed the entire room, bathing every surface in an ethereal glow. And just as suddenly as it had begun, it vanished, leaving only silence in its wake. Damien opened his eyes, surveying the scene before him. The room was exactly as it had been moments ago, except for one crucial difference. Charlie was gone, leaving only the still smoldering cigar on the floor as evidence of his presence. "Last one," Damien murmured, his voice tinged with satisfaction. It had been a long time coming, but at last, it was his turn to return home. Home, where everything made sense, and there were no more missions to complete or lives to save. It was a tantalizing thought. He glanced around the room one final time, taking in the mundane details. The worn carpet, the peeling wallpaper, the faint hum of the AC in the background. Though he'd never admit it, there was a part of him that would miss this world, flawed and chaotic as it was. But his duty was done, and it was time to move on. Eager to leave, Damien headed for the door, but he only took 2 steps when his body shook as it always did before having a vision of his next job. His head twisted backward, his eyes turned inward, becoming ghostly white. His whole body seized in a final spasm, and his vision began. Like dead leaves, under the influence of a whirlwind, the images projected in his mind in chaos that Damien already knew how to decipher. A man sitting in a bar drinking coffee, the same man firing his gun, a name on the mailbox of a building, Roberto Alcon, an explosion on the balcony of a building. And just as they came, the images vanished, and Damien returned from his vision, leaving him breathless and disoriented. "No, damn it, no! You promised it would be the last." His voice echoed against the walls, returning only silence as an answer. 500 years! He clenched his fists and closed his eyes, struggling to regain control over his emotions. It wasn't like him to question his purpose or his assignments, but he'd been so close to going home, a reward he thought he'd earned after all these years. He waited in vain for an answer that deep down he knew he wouldn't get. "All right," he said, resigned. "Forgive me. I'll take it, but I don't promise anything." With that resigned declaration, Damien's resolve solidified. He would do what needed to be done. It was his destiny, after all. He stood up, straightened his clothes, and headed for the door that seemed to sense his determination, and swigged open without a touch as Damien approached. Stepping out into the hallway, he allowed himself one last glance back at the now empty room where Charlie had found redemption. With a quiet click, the door shut behind him, leaving Damien to face the next chapter of his otherworldly existence, guided by wit and grit, prepared to confront the enigmatic Roberto Alcon.